Welcome, everyone. I'm Mel, your technical host today, and Kevin will be leading the meditation in a moment. First, I look forward to seeing some of you again and perhaps seeing some of you for the first time at the retreat that starts next week in Malibu. We will not have Dzogchen Town Hall this coming Sunday. We will, on Saturday, November 4th, have Lama Surya's third session of his master classes. This one is on Green Buddha, caring, self-care, and beyond. We'll put into the chat shortly where you can register for that. And that brings us to Kevin. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kevin. I was talking with Mel Menla about when I first started with Lama Surya Das I was just talking with Mel and Menla about starting my first retreats with Lama Surya Das. So show of hands, who's going on retreat in a week or two here with Lama Surya Das? Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so jealous. Very cool. Yeah, hopefully I can join in the spring. I can't join this one, but yeah, I started with him. I think it was like back in 2005, and we did this. He just went over the paramitas yesterday in a master class, and I heard it was excellent. But that's what he covered, I think, for 5 days at Omega Institute. It was just an amazing introduction to working with Lama Surya Das. And then I did right after that 2-week retreat at Garrison, which was incredible. And so, these prolonged practice periods, this is the first one back since the pandemic, that it's so gratifying. It's so deepening of your practice to be able to settle in for long periods of time and really change the neurochemistry, but not just your neurochemistry, but your own relationship and way of being to your practice. So I'm excited that they're happening again. I hope you guys get to enjoy. In the meantime, we have these, for which I'm very grateful, and I've been participating in since the pandemic and a little bit before. But Menla asked me if I would come in and just to have a lot of background in yoga and martial arts and meditation to help lead in a Dzogchen-like style. So we'll do some practice today, but I want to set that up for you guys in terms of how do we want to practice? One thing that occurs to me to say before you go on retreat is, well, I'm like a broken record on this, and when I teach yoga and martial arts, is you can't go back to the basics enough in a practice. So in the martial arts, we have to have a term called advanced basics, which is when you've gone back to the basics so many times that it becomes a more advanced skill for you to actually own the basics and refine the basics. But I think that's true for any practice that we engage in, whether it's cooking, or whether it's a sport or music, or even how we show up in our relationships. My professional hat that I wear is around leadership, constantly talking about going back to the basics there. So no matter how much time you put into a practice, that back to basics tends to serve you, because it's my experience that 80 to 90% of the benefit of the practice really comes from participating in those basics and attending to those basics. The problem with that is that, I don't know if you've noticed, we live in a dopamine addicted culture where everybody's wanting to constantly connect with their phones and have newness and have novelty and excitement. And, ooh, I haven't heard about that. And, Lama, could you talk about this esoteric thing over here that we have never talked about before? And that's all fine and good in one sense, but if it takes us away from the core of what the practice is about, then, we lose something. So what else to say there? Yeah, so instead of being obsessively novelty seeking and needing newness, needing freshness, you got to think about Lama doing 6.5 years of silent retreat. That's you're pretty much going back to the basics, I'm guessing, almost every day, almost all the time. Even longer, for monastic traditions who spend their whole life in practice. Keep it simple, stupid, as they say. So that's one thing I wanted to just start with is, Going on retreat is a great time to go back to basics for those of you who are doing that. The second thing is a little bit more personal. I'll bring this in and set this up a little bit, and we'll get into practice in just a few moments here. Yeah, so every time that I've had a private lesson with Lama Surya Das, he said the same thing to me 3 times. I guess I'm supposed to at the lesson, and I haven't yet, which checks out. But every time I've gone in, the same 3 times he said the phrase, I think your practice, Kevin, is to learn to strive contentedly, not graspingly. And I love that line so much. It makes a lot of sense to me up here. Strive contentedly, not graspingly. But if I'm honest, I still have no idea what he's talking about. He says that, and I've been thinking about that for a decade and a half. And I'm trying to keep it that way, to be real, because I think it's kind of like a koan for my life. It's kind of this thing I'm not supposed to figure out, but I'm constantly supposed to inquire into, and I keep coming back to. The reason I think it's hard for me is because most of my life has been striving graspingly. And in everything I've done, I'm always pushing myself. I'm always overusing my willpower. I'm not so interested in making things light and playful and fun. I tend to take a more serious approach to practice. Started in Zen, so that also makes sense, So this idea of striving contentedly is a bit, how should I say, against the grain of my natural tendencies. So I think it's a good koan for me, if you will. But I thought we'd practice with that a little bit today and get into what that might look like and sort of how I've been trying to relate to that in the Dzogchen practice as well. So let's start with, where is it? Hold on just a moment here. Let's start with this as a way of setting up striving contentedly. Ring the bell, and then we'll go through the 4 measurables together. You'll join me at the top of the page here. May all beings possess happiness and the inner causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the inner causes of suffering. May all beings remain undivided from the sacred joy, which is free from suffering. May all beings come to rest in great peace and equanimity beyond attachment and aversion of friends, enemies, or strangers. So I see a lot of familiar faces here, so I'm assuming that most of you have been in this practice for a while. So if you will, take your Buddha seat comfortably. Start with a couple deep breaths. You might take a moment to just connect with your why for practice. Why do you practice? That's something that's unique to each of us. For me, I just shared that cracking the code, if you will, of this strive contentedly koan is one of the deep reasons for practice and why I love this practice so much. But just connect with what's your why. Why did you show up today? Why are you listening to this random Kevin dude? What lights you up about this practice more than just Lama, who we all quite enjoy and appreciate? What does the practice give you? So let's go ahead and just arrive here and go back to basics. Just sitting. How many times have we heard that instruction? And yet, can we attend to the basicsness of just sitting? Not making this practice more complicated than it needs to be. On the one hand, what could be easier than just sitting? We're all doing it. Sitting. For some of us, it also might be the hardest thing we've ever done, just to sit still. Just to sit. Time I ever went to a Zen center, I asked for instructions. Do I breathe differently? Do I count my breath? What do I pay attention to? Is there a mantra or something? How do I do this? It said, just sit. Just sit. So notice how there's a both and. There's a striving and a contentedness and just sitting. To cancel out all the extra. To really be focused on just sitting. There's some striving there. But there's also some contentment. Strive contentedly, not graspingly, right? There's some contentedness in just sitting, like, oh my gosh, what a delight. What a luxury to allow ourselves just to sit. Just to take a break. As Lama likes to say, unwinding the habits of overdoing, overthinking, over-emoting, overreacting. None of that's needed here. How great is that? There's great contentment in just sitting. Notice if your mind is already foreshadowing to the second pillar of what's coming here. Notice well, but just breathing. Just breathing. No added, no extra. Most contemplative practices have an aspect of breathing. What's so simple is the instruction in ours. Just breathe. So there's a striving part too here to this, right? There's a striving part to a little bit of concentrated effort needed to just breathe. Whenever our minds become distracted, as they do, minds and thought are consumed with past and future. Practice is consumed with now. So there's a returning over and over and over again to just sitting and just breathing when it gets away from us. So some effort is required. But can we make it effortless? Can we make it strive contentedly? Not grasping. You may notice what happens if we try to grasp and cling to and attach to the now and the here. Slips through our fingers, it quickly becomes insubstantial. But we're always breathing. We'll just let the breath be there. Let the sitting be there. Let here and now and this be here of its own accord. Striving contentedly. For exaggerative effect here, take the next couple breaths in the most contented way that you can. As if you were looking at a beautiful view, or smelling a flower, or just having a really sweet moment of life. It's a delight to breathe. It's so enjoyable to breathe. It's even more enjoyable to just breathe. Which gives rise to the third pillar of natural meditation. Again, how many times have we heard this? It doesn't matter, as if we were hearing it for the first time. Just be. Just a being, a human being. Just allowing ourselves the gift of being. First of all, how can you not be? Isn't beingness just the case? Isn't it always here? Isn't it always now? Try to stop being. Good luck. So letting it be. As our good friends across the Atlantic used to sing. And this is a tricky one, because in the one sense, like, oh my gosh, if we could just let ourselves be, if we could just be beingness and nothing else, if we could subtract all our obsessions about what's going on in the world, if we could subtract all our self-improvement projects, if we could take away all the excess thinking, excess needs, excess wanting, again, what a delight. The contentedness of just being. It's such liberation. It's such freedom. It's such a loving gift to receive from the moment. See if you can let that in just a little bit. Open the aperture. This much more than you're used to. A degree more. Full permission to just be. And if you're able to do that, you can feel the contentedness that comes with just being, but also some striving. It's very hard just to let ourselves be. All our habits, the daily ins and outs of life can pull us away from being a human being. So striving contentedly. Contented beingness is already here. Striving, I don't want to deviate from that, at least in this practice. So now we've gone back to basics with just sitting, just breathing, just being. Instead of three separate things, see if you can make it one thing. See if you can integrate the three. For me, trying to do that in my head does not work as well as trying to do it in my experience, in my bodily sentience of the moment, the full human expression of just sitting, just breathing, just being starts to just feel like one thing in three dimensions. If you can capture for yourself what you have to open to, what you have to find, what you have to practice to capture the oneness and the Trinity. depending on what kind of person you are and depending upon what kind of day you're having, you may need to strive a little bit more to integrate these three of just sitting, just breathing, just being. You may need to add a little dose of effort. Of concentration, of trying, striving. If you fall more into my personality type, as I was describing at the beginning, you may need to let go of effort. And fall back into the contentedness of things as they are. Not you doing the practice, but the practice doing you. And just notice for yourself if one side or the other needs a little more attention. We're going to do a couple more minutes of practice, but if you need to, stretch it out, take a moment, disrupt, take a breath, make a noise, just kind of wake up the vital system a little bit. Give yourself permission to come out of practice and then to come right back in. So stepping back into the practice, look back at yourself in this practice today. and see what you see. And look forward and see if there's any aspect of this practice that we've done today that feels potent, that you might want to carry forth with you, future practice. And then drop the practice altogether and settle into here and nowness, not later, not past, not future, not elsewhere, not what's going on in the world, just this. You could open your eyes if you want, if they're closed, and just look around at the Sangha, us participating in practice together. It's delightful. What grace that we have to do this practice. It's such a miracle. We don't know each other. Even if we met in person, we'd probably be at a retreat in silence and we wouldn't get to talk to each other. And here we are, gathered around this amazing teacher to learn how to really inhabit our lives, our awareness, our beingness. It's quite contented. It's revelry. It's miraculous. I don't know about you, but every time I enter into this practice and join the Sangha, it's a deep rush of gratitude. That's definitely the contented part. And it requires practice. It requires showing up. It requires a little bit of that striving. We'll take just another 2 minutes to wrap up this practice in silence as you see fit. You could return to the basics. You could return to the gratitude and revelry and appreciation for Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Just sit as you need to sit, as you want to sit. you'll join me in dedicating the practice. Precious guide, one with all the Buddhas of the three times, blissful presence and source of all spiritual accomplishments, fierce destroyer of illusion who dispels every obstruction. We pray to you for blessing, inspiration, and realization. Please remove all outer, inner, and secret obstacles and spontaneously fulfill our aspiration. Dedication prayer. Through the merit of this, may the light of the Buddha's precious teachings remain for ages to come, the ground for every single kind of benefit and happiness. May all the supreme holders of the teachings who uphold this living truth accept to live for eons, and their lotus feet stand firm. And so may the sun of altruism and well-being in all its blazing splendor shine the brilliant light in the study and practice of Buddha Dharma throughout every corner of the universe. If you have any comments, questions, want elaborations, you could send a note to Mel or myself in the chat, and if we have time, we'll get into that. While that's happening, first of all, thank you for being here. How was this? Just show hands, thumbs up, thumbs down, exhausted. Okay, good. Okay, great. Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that. And yeah, happy to be here and provide it. Just a quick summary of what we did. This idea of back to basics, like you can't go back to basics enough, no matter what practice you're in. And can you treat it as advanced basics? Can you treat it as, oh, I've seen this 1,000 times, or I've heard it 1,000 times, but that doesn't mean that I'm not tuned in to how important it is. And can I pick up, like in the martial arts, I see a move I taught on day one. But when a world champion would come and teach it, or even if somebody else in a different school would teach it, I'd be like, oh, what's that? How come their finger is over there instead of over here? I'm trying to pick up the details of the basics in the most comprehensive way I can, since basics run everything. I want to get that sense of advanced basics and really tune into that. So hopefully that came across with just sitting, just breathing, just being. But then also integrating the three, and how this kind of koan that I'm working with in my own life constantly of striving contentedly versus graspingly, it's so great that Lama nailed that for me. And as painful as I find that koan personally, it's really revealed a lot for me to practice with. And so playing with this sense then of, how can I both add the right amount of strive and the right amount of contentedness when I'm practicing? Just for starters, in Dzogchen practice, but potentially wider than that too, because everybody's going to be on a spectrum in regards to that polarity of effort and letting go of effort and just being content with things as they are. So, probably where you are better than anyone on that polarity or on the line of that. And how do you need to practice or compensate based on that? It's one of the things I love about Dzogchen practice and Tibetan Buddhism, is how central paradox is in the whole, in so many things. Like the further down the rabbit hole that you go, the more paradox becomes this conundrum that you can't get around. What strive contentedly is a paradox, right? So yeah, I find that very satiating in a weird, messed up kind of way. So Mel, any questions coming into you? I'm gonna check the chat over here for me. And oh yeah, there's a couple things there. Great. Somebody asked what martial arts I teach. The simple answer to that is all of them. I was very involved in the mixed martial arts world until I had a terrible brain injury where I got kneed in the head by a much larger opponent. I did a big reset on my life. I've actually used Dzogchen as part of that recovery process quite a bit in recent years. But yeah, so MMA. It's my favorite thing in the world, by the way, talking about mixed martial arts and MMA. When Lama Surya Das starts talking about the relationship between Tibetan practices and MMA, I just absolutely lose it. I get so excited. Any questions from you, Mel? I'm not seeing anything else.
I have one that I would like to ask. I'm sure I'm asking this for dozens of people present here.
Please.
But I'd like to see the rest of the image on your sweatshirt.
Yeah. We've got some Baby Yoda action here. I may or may not be a royal Star Wars nerd as well. Yeah. And I just watched the most recent show. This other character is Ahsoka. She's my favorite Star Wars character. They just did Disney Plus just did a whole series on her. It's one of the best things I've ever seen them do. I just loved it. They got into a whole Jungian archetype into the shadow realm stuff in that show. It's just brilliantly done. It was a masterclass in Joseph Campbell. So I haven't seen that. It's great. Yeah. And then when Lama Surya Das talks about Star Wars, that's when I really lose it. So for me, it's effort versus struggle. Yeah. So and I also find it's, in different times of life, it shifts, like, so before my brain injury happened, I was doing like 70-hour work weeks and trying to train on top of that, and had just gotten married and all these things. And so it was a lot in my life. And so, in that kind of vein where I'm overworked and it's all striving, I need the contented part to balance it out. But then there was also parts where, as I was recovering my brain injury and I started to get better, I just was sort of, how should I say? I don't want to say atrophy. That's not the right word, but I sort of was in an inertia of not doing anything to put myself back together. I was in a more contented place. I was over the brain injury, but I just wasn't pushing myself to bring myself back to life in the ways that I needed to re-engage life, to re-engage family and friends and work and everything. And so I needed more of the striving side of things, right? I had the contented part, and I needed to go to the other side of the polarity. And so I think it changes based on life circumstances and what's happening in your world. But what I'd also say is, like, I don't know if you've looked around at the world lately. It's a little treacherous out there. And there's a lot going on that is, frankly, heartbreaking to a lot of us if we're really paying attention and we care. And so that can feel like a lot of striving is needed. And therefore, it's my experience, especially working in leadership development and stuff, that more people need to err on the contented side of finding ways to bring in contentment, of finding ways to bring in wind in your sail. So to replenish what's going on around us and inside of us because of everything. Can I get a nod or a thumbs up or something if that connects for you, just so I know I'm not in left field here? Yeah. And so, it's not just our personal circumstances, but it's cultural and world circumstances that can have us need to pay attention to where are we on the spectrum and how do we cultivate that. I think that's one of the beautiful things about Lama's way of being, if you will, too, is he like absolutely terrible things can happen, a pandemic, and he comes in jovial, telling the same old jokes, the happy llama. And I think that's one of the things that we love about him is he's so rested in that contentedness, at least it seems so to me, that he's able to bring it as a gift to everyone else, and still encourage us to strive, still encourage us to practice. And I don't know if you've ever had like a practice for yourself that's really sustained you. It could be diet, it could be sleep, it could be something more rudimentary, like in that regard. But then you take that away and you abandon that practice, and everything that was sustained by it falls apart. I certainly experienced that with my own practice, my own daily practice, that, if I skip a day, it's just crazy how fast everything falls apart. So especially in these times that we live in, keeping with practice is one of the things that can buoy us and keep us resilient. So that's my soapbox rant for the importance of doing your daily practice.
Thank you, Kevin. And doing your practice and going back to the basics as you presented today. I'm going to send out again the link to donate to the Dzogchen Center. It's easy to be glib when talking about giving donations. The first paramita, generosity. And of course, we realize that people on this call probably do give many places and probably get asked to give a lot more many places. But we would appreciate it if you consider giving to further the work of Lama Surya and to continue this glorious practice of Dzogchen as taught by Lama Surya. And with that, I just want to remind everybody that we will not have a town hall next Sunday because we will be on retreat. I wish you all well. May you all be well and happy.
Thanks, everyone.